Hello everyone, hope all of you are safe and healthy. Welcome to IAS Baba's Rapid Revision Series for Prelims 2021. This is session 59 and day 81. So the topics we have are Indian economy, the trends and statistics. So these are the hot topics we are going to discuss. That is the trends of agricultural production and then trends of MSP in India and then agricultural imports and exports. Again the statistics and trends. Then periodic labor force survey. Then the trends on rural urban migration. Then trends on population stabilization. Then poverty in India, basic statistics and other committees. Then literacy in India, the gross enrollment ratio and others. Then trends of GST revenue collection and comparison with other revenue collection. Then trends on forex reserves. So these are the topics. Now coming to the first one, the trends of agricultural production. So friends, here I have brought some of the facts, that is in the last 3 years, that is fiscal year 2018, 19 and 20, the agricultural production was 283 billion US dollars worth in 2018, but that was down to 267 US dollars in 2019, and that was 276 billion US dollars in fiscal year 2020. So there was a dip in the fiscal year 2019 that we have to take care of. So in the graph we can see how the agricultural production was going with a stronger pace, but however it dipped in 2018-19 and now it is picking up the pace once again. So this is the gross value addition. So this gross value addition, it complies with the total production that we discussed in the previous graph. Then come to the next one, comparison of agriculture in the 1950s until 2011-12. So here friends, almost all the statistics are improving, but there are some dips in the middle. We will see first one, the average annual exponential growth rate in the agriculture. Starting from 1951, we started with 1.25% of growth rate, and then the growth rate started increasing to 1.96, 2.22, etc. But there was a dip in the growth rate in 1981 to 2.20 and then to 2.14, and in 2001 it was 1.95. So here friends, the growth rate is slowing down, but however the growth is going on, that we have to take care. Then come to next, the rural population of cultivators, that is also increasing from 1951 to 2001. That is, it started with a 69.9 million workers, then with a 99, then a dip to 78.2 in 1971, and then to 92.5 it rose once again, and then to 110.7 million workers, and then to 127 million workers. Now again it is rising because of saturation in the urban employment. Even the agricultural workers are increasing. So this is giving rise to hidden unemployment. So that we have to take care of. Then come to next, agricultural labors. Friends, as the rural cultivators are also increasing, obviously agricultural labors should also increase. So it has been rising from 27.3 million workers to 31.5, and then to 47.5, then to 55.5 and 74.6 million workers in 1991, and then in 2001 it was 106.8 agricultural laborers. So these are basically the landless laborers, and these constitute the majority of the rural cultivators. So here we can see 31 of 1919 it was less, but however here 106 out of 127. So here it constitutes most of the agriculture laborers. So this is the statistics on agriculture laborers. Then share of agriculture to GDP. So friends, here the share of agriculture to GDP is decreasing day by day. It was 54% and then to 49% and then to 43, 37 and then 30 and then 24 in 2001. So friends, here the contribution of manufacturing sector and service sector is increasing. That is why the contribution of agricultural sector to the GDP is decreasing year by year. So these are some of the facts we have to remember. So the increase in the growth rate, however decrease in the GDP contribution, and increase in the rural cultivators and increase in the agriculture laborers. I hope you have understood and you will remember. Then come to next, the trends. Friends, the production of important food grains. Friends, the production is continuously increasing as the population is increasing, as the cultivators are increasing, as technology is increasing, the production is increasing day by day. So almost all the crops you take here, you take the pulses which is highest in the increasing rate, and then coming to rice, then coming to wheat, and then coming to coarse grains. So almost all are rising. So here the pulses, they have the highest growth rate, and then the oil seeds, they are growing, although in a sluggish pace, they are growing still. So these are some of the facts regarding the agriculture. Then coming to next one, friends, the crop wise distribution of agricultural production. So here it is a table and it is showing the crop wise distribution. That is in 2019-20, the area that is cultivated is highest in the rice, which is 437 million hectares, and then with the wheat it is second with 314 million hectares, and then in the coarse cereals, that is the coarse grains, that is bajra, millets, etc., it is 240. Then pulses, it is 283. So this is something more, but however pulses will be almost all the pulses included. So as a collective it is more, but individual pulses are less. Then this is the total food grains. And then coming to oil seeds, it is 270, and then sugarcane it is 45 and cotton 133. So these are some of the trends we will see in the pie chart which constitutes maximum. So here the rice and wheat have to be taken care of, and pulses have to be taken care of, as questions were asked frequently for pulses. And then coming to the million tons that are being produced. So here friends, the rice is once again the highest with 118.4 million tons, and then 107.6 million tons stands for the wheat, which is second. And then the coarse cereals, it is 47.5, which is very less, and pulses which is 23.2, which is still less. So here we can see friends the area cultivated and the production. So here the pulses productivity is very less because of these are mainly the rain fed crops. No agriculture, no fertilizers are supplied properly for these. Friends, again oil seeds with a 270 million hectares, it is still less with a 33.4 metric tons. And sugarcane, even though it has 45.7 million hectares, but its production is 355 million tons. So this is very skewed, and it is worth remembering. That is, even though the area under cultivation is less, the production is huge because of technology and fertilizers and irrigation also. Then even in cotton it is less with the 133 million hectares and 35.5 million tons. And then coming to the yield. So here friends, the productivity is highest for the sugarcane, that is 77, we have spoken earlier as well. And then comes the wheat with 3421 kgs per hectare. And then comes the rice with a 2700 kgs per hectare. And then comes the overall food grains. And here we can see the cotton is having the least productivity, and then comes the pulses, which is the second least in productivity. So here sugarcane, then wheat and rice, and then coming to least productive crops, the pulses and the cotton have to be remembered. So remember all these things. Then come to next one, the area under cultivation. Friends, as far as the kharif crops are concerned, rice is the highest cultivated, and it is cultivated in 26.66% of the agricultural area. And then comes the oil seeds, it is cultivated in 15%, and then the coarse cereals, which is 14%, and then the pulses with 11%. Then sugarcane and cotton, they are cultivated in lesser amount of area with 10 and 5% respectively. And then coming to rabi crops, friends, as we know, wheat forms the major contribution for the rabi crops. It is cultivated in 34% of the hectare. And then comes the pulses, it is cultivated in 16%. So friends, here in the rabi season, pulses they come in the second place, and oil seeds they take the third place. So this interchange we will remember. And then others, the coarse cereals and rice, they are cultivated in the lesser area with a 5% and 3% respectively. So these are the agriculture production and some of the important statistics. Then come to next one, the trends in MSP in India. Friends, these are some of the crops which have been provided with the MSPs. So there are 23 crops. We will brush up what are those crops. Coming to the kharif crops, paddy, jawar, bajra, ragi, maize, arhar, moong, urad, cotton, groundnut. Friends, cotton is not a food crop, so we will have to remember this. Then groundnuts, sunflower, soya bean, then sesame and niger seed. Then coming to rabi crops, wheat, barley, gram, masoor, rapeseed and mustard, then safflower and torai. Friends, safflower and torai, they are a bit different, so we will remember these as well. Then copra, the coconut, then dehusked coconut. So friends, both copra and dehusked coconut, they are having the MSPs. So we will remember. Then jute is also having MSP. And friends, sugarcane is not having MSP. It is having fair remunerative price. So friends, there is a different methodology for calculating the fair remunerative price of the sugarcane. So that we will brush up here itself. Then the CSCP recommends for MSP for 22 crops before the sowing period each year. So friends, for these 22 plus sugarcane 23 crops, the MSPs are announced before the sowing period. Each year it is announced, but it is announced before the sowing period. Then MSP derived for Thoria is based on MSP for rapeseeds and mustard. And for the dehusked coconut, it is based on the MSP of copra. So this MSP on dehusked coconut, it is based on the MSP of this. And then the MSP of Thoria is dependent on the MSP of the rapeseed and the mustard. So this torai and rapeseed and mustard, this we will remember, and copra and dehusked coconut we will remember. And then the fair and remunerative prices for sugar is also declared. So not only for the sugar cane, even for the sugar, the fair and remunerative prices are declared. So this is an overview of the MSP. Now coming to the trends in MSP. Friends, in almost all the crops, you take wheat and paddy, you take the pulses, you take the cotton, you take the oil seeds. So in every crops, the MSP is increasing year by year. So that too starting from the 2016-17, in almost all the crops we are seeing an increase. So here we are seeing an increase, but however from 2017-18 to 2019 we saw a great increase in the MSPs that were allocated. This might be due to political reasons, but still the hike has to be remembered. So it is not a steady growth but a continuous growth. So friends, I hope you get the difference between a continuous growth and a steady growth. So here the growing is continuous, but it is not steady. The slope is not a straight line, it is curved. Then once again here also in the year 2017, 18 and 18, 19 we saw a sudden rise in the MSP for the moong dal. So this one we will take care of here itself, and almost all the pulses they saw a hike in the MSPs. Then coming to cotton, once again in the 2017-18 we saw a hike in the cotton MSPs also. And then coming to the next, the oil seeds, here as well for some of the oil seeds like sunflower and the groundnut, which were very essential, for those two there was a hike in the 2017-18 MSPs to 2018-19 MSPs. So for other all oil seeds, the MSPs rose at a steady rates. So here we can see a straight slopes, but only the deviation is for these two crops. So this is all about the distribution of MSPs. Then come to the next topic, the agricultural imports and exports. Friends, here is a graph for both exports and imports, and this shows the imports and exports of agriculture starting from 2004-5 to 2020-21. Friends, starting from 2004-5, the agriculture started with a moderate pace and then it started picking up, and then in the year 2012-13 it reached its peak and then it started moderating once again. But however, it reached a new peak in 2018-19. So friends, in the last slide we have seen even the MSPs they have hiked in the 2017-18 and 18-19. So that might be one of the reasons for increased in production, and that can contribute to the exports as well. So these are the two peaks which have to be remembered, that is the 2013-14 and 2018-19. So the exports they are not growing continuously, there is a dip here as well as here. So it is a roller coaster path or an unstable path, we can say that. Then coming to the imports, even the imports it started in a nominal pace, but however it started picking up the pace, and then in 2016-17 the imports rose to the highest, and then it started moderating and now it is going with a moderate pace. Friends, here we can see in the 2016-17 there was a dip in the exports and there is an up in the imports. So dip in the exports and up in the imports means there was a drought like situation and we had to procure more goods from abroad because our production was less. So as our production was less, even the exports was less. So this is how we analyze the statistics. Then coming to more facts regarding the imports and exports. So here is the trend of the exports. The marine products they stand in the top of the list as far as the agricultural exports are concerned. So this is the highest exported agricultural good in India, and then comes the rice, and this rice is other than basmati, which stands at second, and basmati rice alone it stands in the third place of agricultural exports. So basmati rice is one of the important exporting agricultural good of India. And then comes the spices at the fourth and buffalo meat in the fifth, and then sugar, and then goes the list down, and coffee it forms the least in the list. So this might be some 20th, so it is not so important. So here we have to remember marine products, rice, basmati rice, spices and buffalo meat. Then coming to the imports, friends, vegetable oils they are the highest imported agri goods in India, and basically the soya bean oil, the GM soya bean oil which we discussed in the last class contributes to the major imports of agriculture. And then comes the fresh fruits, these are also the highest imported ones, and then pulses are the third highest imported agri goods in India. And then comes the spices once again. Yes friends, spices they stand in the top of the list both in the imports and the exports. So we export most of the spices, but also we import considerable amount of spices as well. And then comes the cashew, sugar, etc., and the line goes as usual. And then the cereal preparation, that is the cereals that are ready made, so they stand in the bottom of the list, and this is not so important because there are many other imported goods below this. But however, the points to be remembered are the vegetable oil, the fresh fruits, the pulses, and pulses basically because it is present in both the lists. So this is all about the imports and exports of agriculture. I hope you will remember it and revise again and again. Then come to the next topic, the periodic labor force survey. A brief account on periodic labor force survey. Friends, the National Statistical Office had launched the periodic labor force survey in April 2017. So this periodic labor force survey, it was started in 2017. Then it gives estimates of the key indicators like the labor force participation rate, then the worker population ratio, then proportion of the citizens unemployed, then proportion of the citizen employed, that is the employment rate in rural as well as urban households, and this data is available annually and on quarterly basis. Then the periodic labor force survey is constituted on the basis of recommendation by the committee headed by Amitabh Kundu. So this person and the committee recommendation we will revise. Then prior to periodic labor force survey, the National Statistics Survey Organization used to bring the data related to employment and unemployment based on its quinquennial household socio-economic survey program. So it was providing the data once in 5 years under the employment unemployment survey, but this periodic labor force survey is a new addition which started in the year 2017. And then the dimension it is looking after, that is the labor force participation rate, and then worker population ratio, and then proportion of unemployed, and then unemployment rate. Now coming to some of the statistics regarding the periodic labor force survey. Friends, we will start with the rural areas. So here we can see the rural statistics, that is the labor force participation rate for the male, it was 56.3% in rural areas, but however it was much less for females, that is 24.7%. So even in rural areas, the labor force participation of the females are much less compared to the males. And then worker population ratio, here also friends, it is 53.8% for the males and 24% for the females. So both in the labor force participation rate and the worker population ratio, the females they have a huge gap that has to be covered, that is almost double in the sense. Then unemployment rate, it is 4.5% for the males and 2.6% for females. So friends, the unemployment rate in females is less because they are mostly indulged in the household chores, and they are also indulged as the helper workers in agriculture and other cottage industries. So this point we will remember, that is the unemployment rate in the female workforce in rural areas is less because they are indulged in many other agriculture and cottage industrial activities. Then coming to the overall, the labor force participation rate in rural areas is 40% and the worker population ratio is 39.2%. That is, most of the people who are willing to work, they are fit for working, that is the indication we get. And then unemployment rate is 4.0 as of 2019 and 2020. Then come to next in the urban areas. Friends, the labor force participation rate in the urban areas for the males is 57.8% and for the females it is very less with the 18.5% of labor force participation rate. And even in the worker population ratio, it is 54.1 for the males and 16.8, very less for the females. And friends, here the difference is that the unemployment rate for the male is 6.4, but the unemployment rate for the females is 8.9%. So friends, it is very large when compared to the 2.6 in the rural areas. So here, because friends, here the urban females, they are only indulged in the household chores which are not accounted as employment, but however the agricultural and cottage industry helping workers, they are considered as employees in the rural areas. So this difference we will remember friends, and moreover friends, these areas are the hot spots of UPSC, and it is common for UPSC to pick up some of the surprising data and to pose a question there. So this one don't forget it. Now coming to total labor force. Now, both rural and urban, friends, the labor force participation rate for the average of rural urban is 56.8% for males and it is 22.8% for females. Then coming to worker population ratio, it is 53.9% for males and 21.8% for females. So the urban rural, they have moderated and a nominal rate of 22 and 21 we got here. And again friends, coming to unemployment rate, it is 5.1% in the males and 4.2% in the females. So this urban, it added to the 2.6%. So that is why the unemployment rate increased. So overall we have 40.1% of labor force participation rate, 38.2% of worker population ratio and 4.8% of unemployment rate in India. So friends, these we will update whenever the new periodic labor force survey comes in. So these are some of the facts regarding the periodic labor force survey. Then come to next one, the trends on rural and urban migration. Yes friends, in the wake of lockdown, the migrants are the worst hit people, and in that context, the rural urban migration it becomes important. Now coming to percentage of migration, friends, the numbers are not so important for us, only the percentage can suffice. Friends, here we have the reasons for migration and the percentage. So friends, here 36% for the work or employment is the highest for males, but it is only 3.2% for females. So the workers or employees, they are the highest migrants of males. Yes, we know that this is basically in the money order economy in UP, Bihar, Rajasthan and other states, wherein the employees they migrate to other states for the sake of jobs. Then coming to business activities, it is just 2.9% for males and 0.3% for females. Yes friends, these business people, they are very minuscule in number, and even though if they are migrated, they constitute only the creamy layer of the society. So that is why they are not so prominent in this list. And then coming to education purposes, it is 6.2% for males and 1.3% for females. Yes friends, here the male students, they are the highly migrated people, and these female students, they only try to study in their home places. And then marriages, friends, this is bit skewed. Only 2.1% of males they migrate during marriages, but 64.7% of females they migrate. Yes friends, in the Hindu culture, it is practice for the females to move to the in-laws house, so that is why this is highest. Then coming to aftermath of birth, these are unconditional. Obviously this is more for the males and less for the females, just like any other trends. Then moved with the households, so here also it is more for males and less for females. And then others, again the male is dominant here. So friends, here 2 points are to be remembered. That is the employment related migration, that is highly skewed in favor of males, that is 37.6 to 3.2%, and then the marriage related migration, that is highly against the females, that is 64.9% to 2.1%. So these two facts we will remember. Then come to next one, some of the statistics here. Friends, here the distribution of age and migration is given. So friends, for both male and female, as of 2007-8 data, it is that 25 to 34 years of age is the highest age group in migrants, and that is 20.8% in males, and then 24.2% in females. And then the 45 to 59% is also the age group which is second highest in migration, and that is 19.8% in males and 22.9% in females. And then coming to overall, again this age group, that is 25 to 34 and 45 to 59. So these are the highest and second highest. Friends, why 25 to 35? Because of the employment. And then why 45 to 59? This is because they are being taken to the cities by the children who will be getting employed. So this one is the employment led migration, and this is the children led migration. So these things we will remember. Then coming to more statistics, the social classes and migration. Friends, here the STs, they constitute for 20% of short term rural migration, and then SCs, they form the 23%, and here the OBCs, they constitute the highest, that is the 39.5%. Friends, in almost all the short term as well as long term migration, and both in rural and urban migration, the other backward classes or the other backward castes, they constitute the highest migrants in all the strata, that is 39.5% in rural, 43.6% in urban. Coming to short term migration and even in the long term migration, they form the highest with 44.5% in rural and 37.5% in urban. Yes friends, we know that more than 2/3 of the population in India, they constitute OBC, so but obvious they form the highest contributors for migration as well. And coming to all others, these statistics are very much in compliance to the percentage of population in India. So the percentage of population with respect to SCs and the overall population, and then the SCs and overall population, and OBCs and overall population, and others overall population, they are in the same order. That is, ST is the least, SC the second, and then the OBCs and the others in the minuscule category. So not so different, only the OBCs have to be concentrated here. Then come to the next one. Here the distribution for various types of migration is being given. So friends, here rural to rural migration, this was 27.1% for males and it was 70% for females. Yes friends, the rural to rural migration is the highest for females when compared to males. Basically this is also for the marital reasons. And then rural to urban migration, this is 39% for males, which is highest. This is for employment related migration. So no prize for guessing. These two skew data, they have a strong reasons for the skew. Then coming to the next one, the statistics. Friends, the migrants are increasing day by day, and even in India they are increasing. So this curve, it shows for India, and this is increasing day by day. And almost all the countries, the migrants are increasing from rural to urban areas for the search of employment, livelihood and other issues. So currently there is a need from the governments all over the world to provide necessary resources for those immigrants who immigrate for various reasons. So these are some of the conclusions we can draw. I hope you will remember this and revise them again and again. Then come to next one, the trends on population stabilization. Friends, here is the growth rate starting from 1950 to 2100. So a very long period of time. So we will discuss. In the 1950s, we started with the 50 crores and then we rose up, and somewhere around 2020 we are around 130 crores, and then we will further rise up to the 150 plus, that is 165 crores, and then we will start reducing. So from here the population starts reducing, that is maybe from 2050 we will start reducing with the population. Then coming to the growth rate, we started with somewhere around 1.5 to 1.6% of growth rate, and we have reached somewhere around 2.2 to 2.3%, and then in the 2000s we reached the 2.1%, that is the replacement ratio, and then we started further reducing. By now we are somewhere around 1.8% of the population ratio, and then after 2050 our rate starts reducing and it goes to the negative, and from there our population starts declining and aging sets in. Then coming to the rate of population, friends, the birth rate and the death rate. Friends, from the beginning of 1901 the birth rate is continuously reducing, but however after 1951 a bit rise in the birth rate was seen, but however that was temporary. Again we started dipping with the birth rate, and now the dip is more steeper. So here this increase in the birth rate was might be due to increase in nutrition and healthcare schemes, but however the decrease in population is due to the awareness and the schemes regarding population stabilization. Then coming to the death rates, so initially starting from 1901 to 1921 there was a hike in the death rates, but however later the death rates it started reducing, and now the reduction is steeper. So this reduction in death rate is basically due to the improvement in the healthcare infrastructure. So these are the birth and death rates. So here we will remember this hike in the death rates and the steady decline in the birth rate except this 1951 to 61 era. So these are some of the facts regarding the population stabilization. Then coming to the trends. Friends, here the group of states who majorly contribute to the population are the Bihar, UP, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan and Odisha. They form the 55% of population all over India. Then the second largest is the group of states, that is Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Kerala. They constitute for 14%. And then the Maharashtra, Gujarat region, and then comes the West Bengal, Assam, then Punjab, Haryana, then others they form the 7%, mainly the northeast and smaller states. So this Bihar, UP, MP, Rajasthan, basically the Bhimaru and the Ganga belt, they have to be remembered. So this north versus south, then this north versus northeast, these debates regarding the population stabilization and allocation of 15th Finance Commission. So all these they come in the same context because of the population growth and population stabilization. Then coming to the sex ratio in the population, friends, starting from 1901 to till 1991 we are continuously worsening our sex ratio. So we were 972 in 1901 and straight away we dipped to 927 in 1991. But however after 1991 we have started improving, but that improvement is not so satisfactory. So this curve, that is the continuous decline, friends, however it is not a steady, there is a difference in the rate of decline, and the improvement after the 1991 have to be remembered. So these are some of the facts regarding the population stabilization. Then come to next, poverty in India. Friends, here is the figure which indicates the population from 1980s to 2011. So here also we are continuously declining, but the decline is not in a steady rate. So friends, the steady means the slope has to be straight line. You agree with me? But the slope is not in the straight line, but it is having variations in it. So that is why the decline is there, but it is not continuous. Then here is the bar graph which shows that in these years, that is in the 2004 and 2011, the decline in poverty was the highest. Basically might be due to MG Narega and other schemes which were brought in. And then friends, inequality is one of the main reasons for poverty in India. And what are the trends regarding inequality? Starting from the 1950s, we started declining with the inequality, but after 1980 and 1990, the inequality increased in both urban as well as rural areas. So even Thomas Piketty, he also said that the inequality is increasing after 1990s. So this is true and the statistics is showing the same. So this dip and rise in the inequality has to be remembered. Then come to the more facts regarding the poverty in India. Friends, here is the contribution of states for the poverty. So the highest state as far as 2011-12 is Chhattisgarh with 39.9% of population. And then the second highest is the Jharkhand with 37% of population. So friends, we will update whenever the new statistics are arrived. And then the state with least poverty is Goa with 5.1% of people living under poverty. Then coming to the Union Territories, so Andaman Nicobar, it is having the least poverty with only 1% of population living below poverty line. But however, among the Union Territories, Dadra and Nagar Haveli, it provides the highest contribution to the poverty with 39.3% of population. So friends, here Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand and Dadra and Nagar Haveli and the Goa and Andaman Nicobar. So these will be remembered for better guessing work. Then come to more facts regarding poverty. Friends, as per the Lakadwala committee, the poverty rate as of 2004-5 was 28.3% in rural areas and 25.7% in urban areas, and as a total it was 27.5%. And then friends, coming to the Rangarajan and Tendulkar committee, they provided different statistics of poverty in India. Yes friends, as per Rangarajan committee, in the rural there was a poverty of 30.9% and in urban areas there was 26.5% of poverty as of 2011-12 and there was 29.5% of poverty all over India. So this was a usually high poverty rate compared to the Lakadwala committee recommendation, which said that there was 27.5% as of 2004-2005. But however, as of 2009-10 itself, the Rangarajan committee said there was 38.2% of population rate. So this skewness we will remember. And then coming to next, the Tendulkar committee. Tendulkar committee gave a different picture of poverty. It said that as of 2011-12, there was 25.7% rural poverty and 13.7% of urban poverty. So this is much less compared to the Lakadwala and Rangarajan committee recommendation. And overall, it said that 21.9% of poverty in India is present. So we will compare this. So it is 27.5% as of Lakadwala committee and 29.5% as of Rangarajan committee and 21.9% as of Tendulkar committee. So Tendulkar committee is the least, and then comes the Lakadwala committee and then comes the Rangarajan committee. So this we will remember, and the numbers are not so important, only the percentage can convey the better information. So this is all about the poverty in India. Then come to next, literacy rate. Friends, just like any other rates, because of the government actions, the literacy rate is also increasing year by year. So here we have a statistics by the UN projections which said that starting from 1950s, so till 2018, we are continuously increasing. But however, the increase in literacy is not steady. There are dips and turns as well. And currently we have 74.37% of literacy rate in India as of 2018. Then coming to some of the trends in the literacy rate. Friends, as we are continuously increasing with the literacy rate, so these two will show the male literacy rate and the female literacy rate respectively, and the gap is reducing. So here see the gap and here see the gap, friends. So the gap is reducing. So this line, it shows the gap. So it is a good sign that the gap between the male literacy rate and the female literacy rate is reducing year by year. Then coming to the more facts regarding the male and female literacy rate. Currently as of 2017-18, the male literacy rate, it forms a whopping 81.5%, but however, the female literacy rate, it forms 64.6%. But the gap is reducing, that is starting from 28.8% of the gap, we have reduced to 16.9%. So this is an achievement, but still there is a long way to go. Then come to next, some of the facts. Friends, which are the states which are contributing to the highest and least literacy rates? So here we can see the states like Tripura, Mizoram, Nagaland, Meghalaya, Sikkim and Kerala and Goa. They are in the green zones, and Tripura is the state having the highest literacy rate, and this is the only state which has more than 95% of literacy rate. So this backs the first rank now. So this has to be remembered. Then coming to the states with the worst literacy rate. Friends, the Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, UP, Bihar, then Jharkhand, then Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, they have the least literacy rate. Friends, note down this state, Karnataka. Friends, in the last classes we studied, Karnataka had the highest foreign direct investment, it had good manufacturing backup, etc. But still the literacy rate is low. So even though the economic growth is good in Karnataka, but the human development is not so good. That is, the health education system are not so good in Karnataka. So these are the few analyses regarding the state's contribution to the literacy. Then come to next, the age contribution to literacy. Friends, the gross enrollment ratio of the primary education starting from class 1 to class 5 is more than 100. So this skewness will have to be remembered, because friends, the gross enrollment ratio says that it is the enrollment of students with respect to the age group. So friends, if a gross enrollment ratio is more than 100%, it means that some of the children who are over and above the required age group are also studying under the same class. So this skewness, that is 120 or 110 plus, has to be remembered regarding the primary education's gross enrollment ratio. Then coming to class 6th to 8th, and then class 9th to 11th, and then class 11th to 12th. So all these, they have a normal gross enrollment ratio, but however the gross enrollment ratio starts declining starting from 1 to 6, then to 6 to 8, and then 9 to 10, and then 10 to 12. So this decreasing rate we will take into consideration. Then higher education is having the least gross enrollment ratio, and that is somewhere around 25 or 15%. So this gross enrollment ratio in higher education has to be noted down. Then come to some of the trends regarding the social classes and the gross enrollment rate. Friends, in all categories, that is in open categories, the gross enrollment ratio is the highest, but however for the scheduled caste it is bit low, and for scheduled tribes the gross enrollment ratio is the least. So because of social exclusion, governmental exclusion and others, the SC and ST people, they are not being able to get good education even in this right to education era. So these are some of the facts regarding the literacy rates. Then come to next, the trends of GST collection. Friends, every month the GST collection will be published in the PIB. So in that context it becomes important. So here is a trend in the last 10 to 11 months regarding the GST. So friends, here in the April 2020, the estimated GST collection was 1,30,000 crores, but however the collection was only 32,000 crores. So this huge skew because of the lockdown, but however later the collection improved and the gap started reducing because of pickup in the business activity. And then in the March 2021, when the lockdown was completely open, India hit a record of 1,23,000 crores of GST collection. So this is the highest, and the GST collection, it hovers somewhere around 1 lakh crores. So 1 lakh crore is the benchmark. So whenever the data regarding tax collection is given and whenever GST collection is specifically given, so remember that benchmark, the 1 lakh crore. Then come to some of the facts regarding other taxation and the GST. Yes friends, starting from 1980-81 to 2016-17, the tax collection is rising continuously. So here we started from absolutely nil taxation, and then we have rose again and again. And friends, while the total tax collection has grown with a stronger pace, the other two, that is the direct and indirect taxes, they have equally contributed for the increase in the taxation. Then coming to the trends in the direct and indirect taxation. Friends, starting from 1980 and 81, the direct tax collection, it started with a nominal amount and then it rose continuously, and now it has overcrossed the indirect collection and now it has reached, but however there was a dip and now both are coinciding. But coming to the indirect tax collection, this was highest in 1980 and 81, and then it continuously started slowing down, and then it crossed and it slowed down in 2007 and 8, and then it went for a further dip, but however it picked up the pace after 2009-10, and now it is coinciding with the direct taxes. So now currently as of 2016-17 and 17-18, the direct and indirect collection are equal, but however ethically speaking, indirect tax should be less and direct tax should be more, because we know that friends, direct tax is progressive in nature and indirect tax is regressive. So this indirect tax, if it is more, this gives rise to inequality in India. So this graph, it would be ideal if this goes like this, that is the direct taxes if they increase further and indirect taxes if they reduce further. So we have to strive towards this state of graph. So this is all about the tax collection. Then coming to more facts. Friends, amongst the different types of taxes collected, the corporate taxes, they form the highest. That is, it forms the 4,84,000 crores. So this is the highest, and then comes the personal income tax. So this is the 3,49,000. And then comes the GST collection, that is the indirect tax, that is 1 lakh crore. We have discussed the benchmark of 1 lakh crore earlier. And then the other taxes, which is 15,000 crores. So the categorization is that first comes the corporate tax, then comes the income tax, and then comes the indirect tax, and then comes the miscellaneous. So this order we will keep it in mind. And then coming to the trend, friends, almost all the taxes, corporate tax, personal tax, then other taxes and indirect taxes, they are growing day by day. But however other taxes, these miscellaneous ones, they are showing a sluggish growth, and this corporate taxes, it is growing with a high speed. So friends, now there is a time to reduce these corporate taxes so that the ease of doing business will be enhanced, and there is a time to increase the personal income taxes and to tax more and more people who are trying to evade the taxes and trying to lead the luxury life with that tax money. So this is all about the facts regarding the taxation. Then come to next one, the trends of forex reserves. Yes friends, as we all know, the forex reserves was the least during the 1991, and that is why we brought in economic reforms. So we start from the 1991 when the forex reserves was virtually zero. That is, we could last only for 7 days. After that, India would go for a bankruptcy. From then, the forex reserves, it started rising continuously and it reached a new peak in 2008. So this peak will be remembered, and that is somewhere around 230 billion US dollars, and then this is rising continuously, and now it is somewhere around 550 to 580 US billion dollars. So this continuous rise will be taken stock of, and this enormous rise will be remembered. Then come to next, the foreign currency assets contribution in the forex reserve. Yes friends, unlike the forex reserve, the foreign currency assets, it was sluggish till 1990. But however, after 1990, it picked up the pace, and now the pace of foreign currency assets is just like the overall forex reserve. So this skewness in the foreign currency assets and the total forex reserves has to be taken stock of, because friends, foreign currency assets are also the part of forex reserves, but foreign currency assets didn't rise just like the forex reserves rose. But however friends, others like the gold tranches, IMF tranches, etc., they compensated for this, and the forex reserve, it rose continuously. So this two skewness here and here has to be remembered. And then come to more facts. Friends, the GDP versus the forex reserves is shown here. The percentage of forex reserve versus the nominal GDP is not stable. It is having a roller coaster path. So starting from July 2012 to January 2019, we are measuring this. So it is a roller coaster path, and it was least in the July 2013, maybe due to hike in the GDP or might be dip in the forex reserve. And then it rose to the peak, maybe due to hike in the forex reserve or due to dip in the GDP. And then it once again slowed down and it reached a new low in January 2019, maybe once again because of hike in the GDP growth rate. So depending on the variations of GDP, the forex reserve versus GDP ratio will also vary. So we need not take this seriously. So whenever the forex reserve versus GDP ratio is given, and if steadily, continuously, these are the words given by the UPSC in the question, so straight away put it as the wrong. So this is the tip we can get from this figure. Then coming to India's ranking in the forex reserve. Friends, India recently ranked 5 in the ranking of forex reserves. So the first rank was backed by China, second by Japan, third by Switzerland, fourth by Russia, and fifth by India, and sixth by Taiwan. So this figure we will remember, and this was the latest one, and India currently it ranks 5 as for the ranking regarding the forex reserve. Then coming to more facts regarding the forex reserves. Friends, as we all know, the forex reserve, it consists of foreign currency assets, then gold, then SDRs, then reserve position in the IMF. Friends, this total reserves, it rose to the 620 billion US dollars, and this was the record in the Indian history. Friends, apart from the initial sluggishness which we had discussed in the last slide, currently foreign currency assets, they provide the highest contribution of 576 billion US dollars for the total forex reserve. And then comes the gold, it gives 37 billion US dollars for the forex reserves. And then comes the reserve position in the IMF, that provides for 5 billion US dollars for the forex reserve. And the last one is the reserve position in the IMF, that provides for 1.5 billion US dollars for the forex reserve. So the ranking is, first comes the foreign currency assets, then comes the gold, and then third comes the reserve position, and then fourth comes the SDRs. So these are some of the figures and statistics regarding the forex reserve. Friends, view the video 2 to 3 times so that you will remember important trends. You need not buy out the whole statistics, and that is not the smart way of preparation. Then come to the last part. Friends, Mahatma Gandhiji famously said that you should have the passion in doing the things, and if you have that passion and dedication, even though you lack the capability initially, you will pick it up, you will learn the ability, and you will earn it, and then succeed in the life. So the passion and dedication, it is most important. So do whatever you like in your life. Do not do it out of peer pressure or some other pressures. So do it on your own interest. So that things will truly fetch the highest satisfaction and actualization in life. So do it, reach the zenith in your life. All the very best. Good luck friends.